What's up again, everybody? We are gonna do something very fun today. Today, we're not just by myself. It's not just me in my room. Well, it is me in my room, but I'm joined by a very special guest and the deck that he played to multiple top 8 finishes, and that's Justin Graham. Justin, how are you doing?
Great. How are you tonight?
Dude, I'm good. I'm so pumped to talk. We were already, like, literally, I think it's been 20 minutes that we've been talking about Kano already. Kano is a fantastic hero. He's a wizard, and he has this amazing ability that allows you to look at the top card of your deck, banish it if it's a non-attack action card, and then play it as though it were an instant, which is just kind of fantastic, isn't it, Justin?
It really is.
And in doing so, it allows you to play very tricky things. It allows you to push a lot of damage and basically just light your opponent on a fire in a beautiful way. And you, sir, just did like what, 2 pro quests this weekend and top 8'd?
I got top 4 in the first one and top 8 in the second.
That's awesome, dude. Okay, so this is the list that you gave me that you've been running, and I wanted to kind of dive into it and break it down. And for anybody that's new to Kano, we'll talk about what these cards do and like what the overall game plan is for the deck, all of that sort of thing. And then maybe we'll dive into more specific things like matchups and sideboarding and things like that. But first, I want to get your overall like experience on Kano. So Justin, you started playing Kano like last weekend, right?
Yeah, sure. No, it was actually the first deck I started with in Flesh and Blood. I started right after Crucible dropped. That was actually my first buy-in into the game, and I've been on Kano from the start. I asked my friend, because I came from Magic, I said, what's the closest to Storm that we have in this game? Mm-hmm. And he said, here's Kano. And I said, okay, let's figure it out.
Dude, and figure it out you have, because you're just like cruising to top 8s, man. That's pretty sick. So with building Everfest Kano and going into the meta, what led you to, I guess, the overarching game plan that you have here? Like, what is that game plan, and how do you view Kano into, I guess, specific matchups, or just overall into the meta game, playing it in? And, like, what's your goal here?
Okay, so there's 2 specific game plans in the deck, and it depends on if I'm in a aggro matchup or what I think may end up being a control matchup, which is anyone with AB 3 or higher.
Okay.
The aggro matchup is play aggressively from hand and the top of the deck, filtering as much as the deck as possible, because we'll probably get outvalued on damage most turns by 1 or 2. But when we have the Wildfire turn itself or the Blazing Aether turn itself, we outvalue them by like 15 plus. The AB plan is a little different. As opposed to outvaluing them, we're trying to hit them for maybe 3 a turn, but all of our cards we play have to be hit effect that they care about, because we're trying to strip 2 cards from hand. Because if we deal them 3, and they have 2 cards in hand on their turn, they look at their hand, they go, dang, if I play anything, I might die. And you're fine with that.
So you're talking aggro matchups. That's like your Katsus. Like, describe me a couple aggro matchup heroes that you might see.
If the card has the word Runeblade in it, it's an aggro matchup.
Truth. Oh my God, so true.
And they're all super good, in my opinion. A super good matchup for you, in my opinion.
Would you say every aggro matchup is good for you?
Yeah, every aggro matchup always feels in my favor by at least like 65%. Bolton is my favorite matchup. A lot of the list, it feels completely unwinnable for them. There are some control Katsus, but I haven't seen one in a long time. We consider a third of the Prisms aggro.
Yeah, that's the sticking point matchup for me, in my opinion, is the Prism matchup.
It is in our favor because Wildfire was printed, but it's only in our favor if you see the Wildfire.
Okay.
If you don't see the Wildfire, it's no longer in your favor.
Okay, and so those are like aggro matchups. And so if someone here is watching this video and they go, wow, that's a lot of the meta that I see currently, then picking this up might be to their favor. And then on the other end of things, we have like more controlling matchups that run a lot of Arcane Barrier. I'm thinking things like Guardian, right?
Yeah, every Guardian I auto-assume is a control matchup unless I know the Guardian player specifically and I know they're not on control.
Would you consider Starvo the AB side of things?
Yes. I have seen lists of Starvo that's running 1. I've also seen lists that ran 5. Or 4 in Crown of Seeds.
Yeah, Crown of Seeds is one of those crazy cards that can act as a pseudo Arcane Barrier each time.
I think Crown of Seeds is awful against us. I think because if you use it on my turn, Wildfire is the most important card in the deck. And you use one of your AB on my turn that you can't use on your turn anymore.
I guess that's a good point, yeah.
And that's the only time Wildfire is relevant, is on your turn.
So overall game plan for aggro is to just race it down and then to play a more of a measured approach that tries to strip cards from hand with on-hit effects if it's a control matchup.
Yeah, and with the control matchup, if you can sneak in energy pots onto the build, you're pretty happy. I ended up Prism control matchup with 4 AB. I went into their turn with a card in arsenal, 4 cards in hand, and 7 resources on field.
Okay, so with this build, the one thing I want to talk about before we go like just into these reds, overall distribution, and this is something we talked about before I started recording, so shame on me. But you have a ton of reds in comparison to blues, in my opinion. I wasn't ready for that. And this is your main board, right?
Yes, that is my main board. And that doesn't change against most decks.
So talk to me about why you're going more reds than blues, because I will say I've noticed more traditionally that you end up with at least equal or more blues than you do with reds.
So we play more reds we'll start with the aggro side of the matchup. We need the damage spells. There's nothing that feels worse than going into one of us is dying on their turn, and I draw my hand of blues, and then I hit blues off the top. There's also the fact that unlike most decks, almost all of our reds, almost all of our cards block for 2, which means that in the control matchup where I'm having to play late game, if I am forced to block, I can block with reds, save the blues, and remember it's the reds back in later.
Yeah, they almost all block for 3. I mean, the only cards that don't block for 3 here are like Stirs.
Any Tome and Stirs.
Yeah, the 3 Tome of Fiendals, and then of course your energy pots don't block, but everything else blocks for 3, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, which is crazy. And that's something like underratedly good about Kano, is that he can just throw anything on the board and just block out or block like triple block. As long as it's not like weirdly dominated, he can just deal with it, right?
Yeah, and we actually have cards via Sideboard for those cards specifically.
The equipment's probably the easiest part, right? You want to walk us through each piece of equipment as we go, and I'll just be like your Vanna White. I'll just show off what you talk about.
All right, that's not a problem. So Arcanite Skullcap is played as my only headpiece for the sole reason that it says I start the game at 33 health. I've actually been Findals has bothered me for a long time because most of my games don't last long enough for me to get a trigger off of it. So for a long time, it's been a very expensive piece of Iron Rot, but it's better than Iron Rot because on the occasion, it does give me a free resource.
You know, I will say this. It's crazy that you say that games for you are lasting less than the 3 turns that it takes to tick up the Tunic to 3. But thanks to a couple of new cards like Aether Wildfire, it makes a ton of sense that you can just get there.
Metacarpus Nodes is played for, I guess it would technically only be one reason because we don't have any other gloves that we would play. But if we did, the reasons for it are the AB1 is good in the mirror match, and it's a playable card against any Runeblade.
Yep.
And the extra pump for the full turn, as opposed to just one card when needed, is really good.
And then finally,
and this is the most important card in the deck. I could cut any other card, including the new Wildfires, Blazing, anything before I cut this card. It is how I win most games.
Yep.
Because the ability to go, I drew a bad hand for Kano uses, but I drew lethal if I could play this one card from hand, is how most games end.
Yep, and so being able to destroy this at instant speed on your opponent's turn and then play something from hand at instant speed allows you to just kind of open up your hand to crazy kind of combos. And so if you're new to Kano, this is, I can't say it enough, this is a must. I know that's kind of weird to say because like it's a legendary equipment, but if you want to play Kano at kind of like a high level, this card is super necessary. So I get that that's a little bit scary, but dude, if you pick this up and just jam some games of Kano, you'll see what I mean, and you're gonna enjoy yourself a ton because it's really fun to storm Striders for lethal, and you'll do it a lot with the deck. Am I right?
It really is. It also has Arcane Barrier 2 on it.
It does,
which
yes.
In most matchups isn't relevant, but in the mirror it is, and against Briar in specific, it's relevant because Rosetta Thorn exists.
Yeah, Rosetta Thorn exists, so any Runeblade, which is now all running Rosetta Thorn, pushes 2 and 2, and I've found that this deck, surprisingly, just blocks really well, especially Arcane. Because you have Arcane Barrier 1, Arcane Barrier 2, and if you're really low, which is oftentimes the case, you could even do Arcane Barrier 3 if you wanted it.
At the start of the turn.
Yeah, right? Which is kind of funny. Okay, so let's break into these reds. Starting, of course, with Aether Wildfire. You know, here's what I'm going to do. I want to dig in like this. This is what I'm going to do. And we can just rifle through from the back to the front. So this card is pretty good, yeah? I've heard Aether Wildfire is, like, not bad.
It's okay.
If you don't know, it straight up just deals 4 damage. So there you go. I mean, you're happy with just dealing 4 damage. But I guess if it's your opponent's turn, it stacks onto everything. So that's fair.
There's actually a big thing on that won me a matchup. I had a Kano mirror on Saturday at the ProQuest.
Yeah.
Wildfire says an action card, not action
Right.
card you control. So I played lethal at him, and he responded with a wildfire, and I just took it.
Yep.
And then when he tried to go for Kano after, we responded and killed him with his wildfire buff.
Yeah, because it does buff, like if your opponent plays Wildfire, it does buff yours as well. But then again, if you play Wildfire and they have like, I don't know,
I
arcane
sided out the
damage.
matchup.
Yeah, if they have arcane damage at all, you're just like, uh-oh.
I pulled it out. That is a card. That is the only card that comes out in the wizard matchup.
I could see that.
I take wildfire out. I'm not dying to it. A big thing that I also figured out on mistake was Sting of Sorceries is an action. If you go for a wildfire turn and you see a Sting of Sorceries, you better kill them.
Yeah, otherwise you're
Or
probably
they're going to kill you.
Yeah. So Aether Wildfire, an easy 3 of one of the best like enablers for crazy combos and just win conditions, I would say, in the deck.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It is the enabler. It's what we dig for.
Yeah. Let's go back to front. So Forked Lightning. If you don't know Forked Lightning, if you're new to Wizard, Forked Lightning is kind of one of those weird cards that costs 3, and it says deal 2 arcane damage, and then it says deal 2 arcane damage. This is one source, like the card here is one source, and these numbers will stack based on you using different effects to buff arcane.
It has been a staple in the deck since it was printed. It was the card we used to search for before they printed Wildfire, because it was the card that we could make the highest amount of damage.
And it's still good, even with Wildfire. I mean, it's really hard to put.
It got
like,
better with Wildfire.
Yeah, if you can put Wildfire alongside Forked Lightning, then it's like game winning. Even just running out Crucible of Aetherweave into Forked Lightning is still some value, which is fantastic, because if you apply a +1 buff to this card, it's going to apply to each of those numbers. So this is another one of those giant explosion-y cards that we have in the deck. And you were talking about Blazing Aether.
Yeah, so before this set, I did not like Blazing Aether as a card, because on the off chance you ran into AB4, you almost got no use out of it. It was a red block 3, which just felt bad. It was in the deck previously because the line of play was lesson into lesson into lesson into Blazing Aether.
Yeah.
If you ran into no AB decks. But now the printing of Wildfire alone made me value the card much higher, because on a Wildfire turn, the card's just good.
It is, yeah.
It buffs across the board, and then it gets everything, and then it gets the original Wildfire buff as well.
Yep.
All at the low cost of a Kano
0.
activation, most likely.
Yeah, you just off the top of the deck. Now, I should ask this before we keep going. When you're playing Blazing Aether and really all these combo turns, are you pitch stacking and like lining things up, like early game pitching to the bottom of your deck and then looking? Or are you, I guess, are you opting? Like, how are you lining those combos up?
For aggro matchups, pitch stack doesn't typically work.
Right.
Because you don't make it back to the bottom.
Right. Exactly.
Like, I can't pitch stack against Chain, because he's going to be on Soul Shackle 7, and I'm going to die before I can get to it.
Yep.
That's why we try to go through 5 to 6 cards a turn, so that we can see our scry effects, so that we can see our Wildfires or our Sonic Booms or our Blazing Aethers.
And so allowing yourself to line up like a Forked Lightning or an Aether Wildfire alongside of your Blazing Aether, you do that through the means of opting, which, by the way, leads us to this wonderful card that you actually run in red, yellow, and blue, and I had never seen the yellow put into a deck, and I don't know why I didn't think to do it myself, but you want to talk through us on this Aether Spindle card.
Yes, so this is actually a key card in every matchup, be it control or aggro, because in aggro, it's a blue pitch that hits for 5, and then looks at the top 5, which means I can get a Kano activation, play the top, arsenal a card, and still have my set 4. Or if I was forced to block, it means I can set my top 4 and set my Kano activation. And in the control matchups, it gets over AB3.
It's so good. It's so good. Just like the straight up, even the yellow. When I was messing around with this deck after you sent it to me, I was like, even the yellow feels like it has value, because if they're not going to stop me from opting, then I'm just getting free looks into what I'm digging for. And if they do stop me, then I'm not taking a bunch of damage on their turn. I would say this is one of the best cards in the deck, personally, just because it allows you to dig, man.
One of the best. It's probably the best non-majestic, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a great argument. Now, talk to me about Zap, because we were talking about this before. You said you didn't actually run Zap.
I didn't run Zaps at all. I actually hate Zap with a passion. And it irks me that I have to play it now. but I have to play it now. I actually got in some playtesting with another player at a ProQuest last weekend after the rounds, and he was on Starvo, and it let me know that I have to have zaps for 3 reasons. The first reason being if I have to block out, if they come in with a 11 attack and I need to not take 11, I can block with 3 cards, play that for free on my turn, or I can block with 4 cards from hand and play that from Arsenal with no issues. The next instance is Wildfire. There are times, since I am a red heavy deck, that I don't have as many blues as I would like. So using a blue to play a card from the top is really good for me.
Yeah.
And the last reason is one of the sideboard cards, which I'll mention that once we get to the sideboard card.
These ones are also fantastic. We can just run these down like this. Red Reverberate opens up cards from your hand.
It enables the wide turns that you're always looking for. It also helped me enable Wildfire turns when you draw it and you hit that off the top instead.
And then Stir the Aether Wind's a fantastic card overall because it, again, all of these cards, or at least these few that we're talking about right now, open up your hand and allow you to play things without breaking boots. Plus, this gives a huge buff.
It does give you a buff. It's the only card I would contend with against Aether Spindle as the best non-majestic in the deck. Because a buff 3 plus instant speed means that you can, if you hit it from the top, you can play 2 actions on your turn in essence.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, if you're
play
KOing on your turn.
You play it instant, then you play action.
Yep.
And just a +3 buff is ridiculous, especially if you Fort Lightning with that and 2 blues is 12 damage.
Indeed. Oftentimes you find like this is one of the linchpin cards for winning the game. Like in the end of the game, you just win the game if you have a stir, you know?
It is a card that we arsenal a lot. Because we don't want to keep it in hand because it is one of the few block 2s.
It is, yeah. It's one of those sad moments where you have to block 2 with a stir. You never like it, right?
Yeah, never.
Okay, so here's an interesting thing. I was running 2 tomes, and you have 3 here, and I want to know your feelings on tome.
I love tome with a passion. It enables the widest turns possible when you set the deck properly.
Yeah.
Or if you're just lucky, because that's a thing that happens.
If you just hit it, man.
That happened with me last night where I blotted Xaxes, he Artivored, it was going to kill me, and I had nothing to do. So I was like, well, look. Hit Tome, drew 2, hit Tome, drew 2, hit Blazing Aether, Aether Flare, snap back for lethal. Off the top. And I was like, well, I guess if you just draw the tomes, you draw the tomes. It happens.
Most definitely.
The good thing with it is Reverberates are fine.
That's right.
And on the rarest of occasion, I've used that first ability to kill someone.
Snapback. Do we even need to talk about this card? It's super good.
Not really. It's just good.
It's super good.
It triggers all of your good cards, and it lets you play more than one action a turn.
Yeah. Being able to just flash down this card after, like, really anything like Aether Flare is fantastic, or just even an Aether Spindle if you can play this.
It was actually one of the only cards that made Chain Lightning mildly playable.
Oh my god, so true. We both talked about this off. I should have recorded this part because we can
talk about when we get to the yellows.
Yeah,
that card's so bad.
Chain Lightning, man, I'm not a fan. Okay, Aether Flare's the last red that you have. What do you got on Aether Flare?
It's the best. It's the best and worst common in the deck.
That's an interesting take.
It's the best because it's a really good card when you have the cards to go with it. Like an opening hand, like if you have 3 blues and an Aether Flare, and then a red sitting on top, you're really happy.
Yep.
But when you stuck with a 2-card hand, when you had to block with 2 cards to live, and Aether Flare's your last card, it's a blanket damage card. Or when you just have multiple reds in hand, like when you see Reverberate that and 2 blues, you're like, man, it can be a really good card, but it's hard to make it work the way you want to. I think it's a bait card for new Kano players.
I think it's one of those that you still play, though. And you obviously have it here in the triplicate.
Because you can just do good with it, but you can't get greedy with it.
That's true. That is a good way to put it. This is not a greed card, everyone. It's not a greed card. It's just value.
If you just play it out for 4, you just played it out for 4. Don't hold it. Don't save it. Go in for the damage. We're an aggro deck.
Right. That is exactly right. And I think I've fallen trapped to that myself. Okay, yellows.
I know I have.
Dude, me too, man. Yellows. Okay, so I want to start with this one. Yellow. I know this is not the most powerful yellow we're talking about, but Aether Spindle yellow. Again, I was floored, man. I didn't realize how like comfortable it feels to just hit the opt until I really started playing a ton of Aether Spindles. It feels fantastic.
It does. So I actually only play it in the aggro matchups. I don't play it in what I assume to be a control matchup.
So you side this out?
I side this out. Because I do count Prism as a control matchup until I see what they flip. I leave it in against Prism. In any Guardian matchup, it comes out because I have to assume that they're on AB3 with Crown of Seeds at a minimum. And it will never touch them. In the Guardian matchups, yes, I side in 6 and I take out 5.
Oh, okay.
And in doing so, I up my blue count.
Sure.
And then
we'll talk about that, I guess, when we get to the sideboard.
Yeah.
You can tell me specifically which cards you take out. But these Aether Spindles in the aggro matchup feel fantastic. They're
amazing.
They're super good cards. Lesson in Lava is actually one of my favorite cards in Kano. I don't know if that's like underrated, or looked down upon, but I love what you said earlier is one of my favorite lines of going Lesson in Lava, Lesson in Lava, Lesson in Lava, Blazing Aether. It's just so funny to me.
That and Arsenal with a full blue stack is what is it? 20 damage turn over no AB, and that uses nothing. You didn't use your boots, you didn't waste your gloves, you didn't need your tunic mana. It's just, I know you were above me, but give me half your life total.
It's so fun.
I will point out something that the judge didn't realize, and he was a Kano player at my Saturday event. Lesson in Lava says wizard card, not wizard action. So you can get the wizard D-react with it.
Oh, that's an interesting point.
So at Vegas before the new set, I used this card to get Aetherize a lot because I was playing it for the Art of War. But it's still a wizard card.
Yeah.
This card says wizard card, not wizard action card, like every other wizard card in the game.
Wow, that's fascinating, man. I didn't realize that either. I want to talk to you about this because I actually had a conversation recently, or I was part of a conversation where someone mentioned that they didn't run a ton of Tome of Fiendals in Kano, and I do actually run Tome of Fiendals in Kano. What's your take on Tome of Fiendal? Because you do have 3 in the deck.
If it's seen off the top, it nets you 2 resources. It costs you 2 cards to play it from the top, but you gain 2 resources overall. Or it let you filter bad hand. So if you pitch blue, pitch red, you didn't gain anything, but you got rid of a red you didn't want.
Sure.
I think that's fine. And from Arsenal, I only ever play this card from Arsenal if I have Tunic mana up, unless I'm at no other end. Because gain 6 life in a deck where we started a 10 life deficit is really good. We don't need setup to be able to play this and keep going. We don't need Mage Master Boots. We don't have to break anything. We can remove Tunic, play it, gain 6, and then Kano you off the top anyway. The only problem I have with Tome of Fiendal is it's not hittable off of a Sonic Boom.
Which we'll talk about here in a second, actually, because Sonic Boom, I think, is the next card. Yeah. So if it's not hittable off a Sonic Boom because this looks for a wizard non-attack action card so that you can banish it, whereas Tome of Fiendal, of course, is generic.
So that's why I've had people ask me about the new potions or some of the new talismans and why I'm not running them. I don't like having more than 6 non-hits in the deck.
Yeah, I noticed you don't have Eye of Ophidia as well, and I was like, ooh, interesting.
I have disliked that card since I played it like the 4th time in Blitz.
Yeah, you hit it off the top and you feel really bad, right?
Yeah, you Kano it into it, and you're like, well, my turn's over. You Sonic Boom into it. You're like, well, that was a bad Sonic Boom.
Yep.
It doesn't trigger any of your wizard cards that say, hey, if you've done a wizard thing, keep going.
True. It's true. It just opts for you, which is good, but technically you're playing other forms of opt, right?
But I have enough other forms of opt that I don't feel the need of adding a whiff into my deck that can cost me a game.
That is a very, very valid point.
Yeah, the difference between I and Epot to me, while I does describe me to, if I have a hand of Epot and 3 cards, or I and 3 cards, I can triple block with one hand and just play out an energy pot. The other one I can triple block and I can scry 2 and use Kano's ability and hope I see a 0 in the top 2. Which before recently I only ran tomes as 0s.
All right, Sonic Boom. This is a fun card. Dealing 3 arcane damage, and you can buff this, of course, with the Crucible of Aetherweave. But then just being able to go wide with a card like this is helpful.
Yes, this is actually this is one of our new lines of play for OTK turns. It's actually how I beat Starvo, a Starvo player that I'd never beaten before. He'd never lost to me while I was playing Kano while he was playing a Guardian. Until yesterday actually. Where I called him on a triple red hand and I hit Aether Wildfire into Sonic Boom into Sonic Boom into Blazing Aether.
So that takes us through the yellows, and that leads us to the blues. And a lot of these cards are literally just like blue. It's blue because I pitch it, right? So like, for example, Blue Reverberate is super solid because it blocks 3, it pitches blue, and you could also play it, right?
I have played it on rare instances of where I have Tome in hand, and I just want to get a little bit of value while playing out of Tome.
Gaze is actually really good, though. We should probably talk a little bit about Gaze, because this is one of those cards that, like, fantastic in multiple different ways, right?
Gaze is really good. It's also awkward when it's the first card you see on a Kano turn, especially if it's their turn, because it now means you have to go a card extra.
Yeah, it makes
to
you
get full
commit,
value.
right? Otherwise, you're not getting it to return to your hand.
That's why Snapbats are really good in the deck, because you can play Gaze, hold priority, play Snapback. Snapback sees that you've played another card.
Yeah.
Once Snapback resolves, Gaze resolves and then sees that you've played another card.
Yeah, Gaze the Age is pretty solid. Aether Flare, it's a blue that pitches, and maybe you use it, right?
Yeah, so we don't have a lot of blues to choose from that have things. We don't want any blue that's not a wizard card, because we don't want to start adding whiffs into the deck.
Sure.
So we try to play as many blues with hit effects as possible.
Sure. Blue Aether Spindle, same exact thing. It's a blue with a hit effect. This one's actually fantastic, honestly.
It's better than most of our blues.
Yeah.
It's better than almost all of our blues, actually.
If I wanted to play any of these blues, it'd probably be this one first, and then maybe Gaze second. I don't know, Snapback seems good.
Yeah, it's probably better than Gaze, just in the sense that it does what Gaze does, but you deal damage.
Yep. Truth. Speaking of
Snapback almost got added in as yellow because of Aether Wildfire.
Yes.
Because you don't mind playing blue Snapback whenever you have it getting +6 on the stack.
Yep.
Still a 1-for-7 at instant speed at that point.
Yeah, and the yellow may just be a consideration for future editions, because it just seems really good if you can line it up alongside of a Wildfire, right?
Yep. E-Pot is
3 E-Pots, right?
Yes, it's a hit and a miss with me. It's a love-hate relationship because it blocks for 0.
Yes.
So there are turns where you're just sad, and it also doesn't hit off of a Sonic Boom.
Yes.
But in games where, like, when you draw a triple blue hand or a 4 blue hand, and you play off the top, you can still just action point, play out an E-Pot.
Mm-hmm.
And that all, like, you got to do something valid and set up a even more valid turn later. This is actually probably my least favorite card in the deck, and I'm almost required to play it now because of Wildfire and Sigil on the sideboard. Because there's more zeros that actually do something, even if it's just 1 crappy point of arcane damage, is better than seeing a 2 cost that I can't play.
That is true. A 0 off the top. A 0 off the top with a Wildfire is far better than just about anything you can see, right?
Yeah, because then it comes in. Yeah, because 0 for 5 is really good, strangely enough.
You're not wrong. Who would have
0 for 5 that's almost unblockable.
This is really my least favorite card. I am not a fan of Blue Scalding Rain.
Sorry, I was wrong. Zap is not my least favorite card. Scalding Rain is.
And I do play this as well. Better. Yeah, exactly.
We ran out of cards. I've had a lot of people talk about the new set with like Emerita's Scalding or some of the other random cards.
Mm-hmm.
I already have more 2 costs than I want in the deck as it is. So a 2 cost that's 4 sometimes isn't good enough in my opinion to play over a 1 cost that's just always 2.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I actually swapped this out. I don't play the Scalding Rains now that we have Scour. I play blue Scours in main board over this. It's just
my only contention with it is if I see this off the top on a wide turn, a Wildfire turn, this still deals damage.
That's true. Yeah.
Scour targeting 0. The last judge ruling I got was it doesn't get a buff from Wildfire.
Yep. Not anymore. Yeah, they ruled that in the comprehensive rules. This one that came out over the weekend.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, that's one of the things. You can't buff a 0 with Wildfire on Scour if it has no target. But for me, I don't know, like Scour for example just felt better. But you do run it because it's blue and it blocks 3, right?
It's a blue block 3 that has a number on it greater than 0.
There you go. That's the way to break it down. So that's our main board, 66 cards. And quickly, let's go through the sideboard, because you have some of the most interesting sideboard cards I have ever seen. Like, for example, a card I loved in OTK Viscerai, Enchanting Melody.
So it is a Guardian only card. No matter what Guardian I sit down in front of, if I see the word Guardian on it, that comes in
I could see
every
it.
game.
It's fantastic because that block, right? It just sits out there.
At worst, it's a block 4 when I'm trying to value a hand. At best, you're stopping a dominate attack that you couldn't previously.
And because you're almost always guaranteed to play a non-attack, you can just float this forever. It feels almost like an E-pot in that way.
Yep. It also has go again, so it doesn't just take up your turn.
That's true.
And you can play it off the top, which I have done.
Ooh, that's a good point too. I hadn't thought about that.
That was actually how I won a lot of Guardian matchups before Everfest. Was they come in with a Crippling Crush dominated? I had a Enchanting set off the top with a Spindle, and then flashed it in, block with hand, block with that, and live.
So this is a card you have exactly two copies of this. So you side this in for Guardian matchups. What do you take out for Guardian matchups in place of this?
So I side in 6. I take out 5. I take out yellow Aether Spindles.
Okay.
I take out 1 tome of Findal, however you want to say it. We take out the tome because we're adding in cards. We're adding in a decent amount of cards that can't be hit off Sonic Boom.
That makes sense. You have to take out something that can't, so that your ratios don't like shoot up.
Yeah, and then another card we take out is Blazing Aether.
Do you take out all 3?
No, 1. We take out 1.
Okay.
One Blazing Aether. Because we assume them to be on AB3. And Blazing Aether is a really hard card to set up on AB3.
Sure. I can see that.
A lot of times it's going to come in for 3 damage, which isn't the worst thing in the world. It's still a red zap at that point, but that's not what you want out of the Blazing Aether.
Truth. So you got 2 Enchanting Melodies here. You have 3 Scours, and I love Scour, actually. It's one of my favorites. It's sad that you can't do the thing we were just talking about with it. If it deals 0, you can't get the buff, which does make it worse, but I still like this card a lot into like Runeblade. It feels so... I actually did this last Thursday. I was playing into a chain, and I drew this in my turn 1 hand. They started, so they shackled up, and I just arsenaled it on my turn. Just waited 2 turns, blocked a little bit, and then just scoured, and they reset to 0. Oh, it's so nice.
I play this against Chain, Viscerai, and Prism. And it just comes in, nothing comes out. I just up the blue count in the deck.
Yeah.
I actually had a really good one the other day with Scour. I had one in Arsenal, just like you, playing against OTK Viscerai. And he broke Skeletor with 10 rune chants out, and I held priority. I broke my boots, activated weapon, and killed his 11 rune chants.
Oh my god.
And then let Skeletor resolve for 0, and he just stared at me like I was the worst person in the world. Yeah, it's really good against them. It's also the only reason we can try to beat Aura Prism, because the ability to kill off these irritating 0-cost auras, and the ability to kill every spectral shield while dealing damage after feels amazing.
That's the real kicker, is that you get to push arcane damage. Like if this was just removal, like you're like, okay, cool, but the fact that it also like advances your game plan of just burning them out. Okay, I think you have you have 2 more of these Sigil of Parapets, right? You have 2 sigils.
Yep. Those come in the Guardian matchup.
Sure.
It's one of the other cards. It is for the Oak. It's mainly for Starvo at this point, because I don't get to see a lot of other Guardians. And we only play it, and if they're coming in for lethal, you always play it, obviously. In situations where they're not killing us with a dominate attack, we only play this on Crippling Crushes and Oakenolds.
Yep.
We care about hit effects. Even though we're Kano and we can dump our hand, and we're going to dump our hand to do this, at least this way we're dumping our hand and full blocking.
Protecting ourselves. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and this is the card that we added red zaps and blue zaps in for, because the more 0s we have, the better that card becomes.
Sure. So with Starvo, you're bringing in these 4 cards, yeah?
The 2 behind it as well.
Okay, and then also 2 remembrances, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Remembrances, we bring in only the Guardian matchups. We don't bring it against Prism, because even if they're on Control Prism, we don't feel like we need it. And if they're not Control Prism, we feel really bad that we had it. For Guardian, no matter the Guardian, they're probably running at least 3 Arcane Barrier, 4 Arcane Barrier. So we can know that the game's probably going to go longer than we want. So we can block early and aggressively with reds. Or if we just see Stirs and Fort Lightnings early, we can shove them back in the deck, because those are cards that always get over.
That's super easy. Barely an inconvenience, some might say. Dude, I thoroughly appreciate you talking us through the way you've constructed this deck. I feel like we covered a lot. Let's see, we covered the deck contents, the overall game plan of just sort of burning people out in aggro, just kind of taking damage and trading it, and then swapping into control matchups where we're stealing cards from hand. I am so happy that you are doing so well with Kano, because I've just fallen in love with Wizard, and I hope that with us talking about this and taking like a deep dive into this deck, that more people just jump on the bandwagon and try him out, because he's super fun.
I agree. I think more people need to play him. He is much better than most people give him credit for, and I think he's well placed in this meta. And thank you for having me here. It was a great time discussing and interacting with you.
If you guys enjoyed this video, feel free to pop up here and make a number go to a number. And as always, everybody, thanks for watching.